Welcome to Learn English Podcast.
You understand everything. The movie, the podcast, the conversation happening next to you at the coffee shop. You get it, all of it. But the moment someone turns to you and says, "So, what do you think?" your mind goes completely blank. The words are in there somewhere. You've heard them 100 times, but when you open your mouth, nothing comes out the way you want it to. That is not a language problem. That is a very specific, very fixable problem. And today, we are fixing it.
Welcome back to Learn English Podcast. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Mark. So glad you're here today, because this one is personal for a lot of people. I know because we get messages about this exact thing almost every single day.
Today we're talking about one of the most frustrating experiences in language learning, understanding English perfectly, but freezing the moment you have to speak. We know why it happens, and more importantly, we know how to fix it.
And if you're new here, hit subscribe. We post every single day, and tomorrow's episode is just as good as this one.
Let's get into it.
So, Olivia, let me start with a question. Have you ever met someone, a student, a friend, anyone, who could watch an English movie without subtitles, read a novel in English, follow a fast conversation between two native speakers, but the moment they had to say something, they just froze?
Oh, completely. And honestly, I've been that person. When I was learning my second language, I could read a newspaper article and understand almost everything. But if someone asked me a question in that language unexpectedly, in a shop, at a bus stop, anywhere, my brain just shut down, like a computer that crashes when you open too many tabs.
That is such a perfect description. Too many tabs open and the whole system freezes.
And the frustrating part is that you know the words. They're in there. You've seen them, you've heard them, you've read them. But in the moment of speaking, you can't find them fast enough. And while you're searching, the moment passes, and you feel embarrassed, and that embarrassment makes it worse next time.
And this is actually a well-understood phenomenon in language learning. There's a name for it. Linguists call it the gap between receptive competence and productive competence. And understanding what that gap actually is, that's the first step to closing it.
Let's break that down. Receptive competence is your ability to understand language, reading and listening. Her receptive competence in English is very high. She understands almost everything she hears. Productive competence is your ability to produce language, speaking and writing. His productive competence is still developing. He understands a lot but finds it hard to speak fluently.
Fluency gap is the space between what you understand and what you can comfortably say. A lot of learners have a significant fluency gap. Their ears are ahead of their mouth. And here's the key insight. These two things develop at different rates. Receptive skills almost always develop faster than productive skills. This is completely normal. This is how language acquisition works. You are not broken. Your brain is just doing what brains do.
When we learn a language, we absorb input first. We hear, we read, we process, and over time, that input builds up a kind of mental vocabulary bank. You know the words, they're stored, but storing a word and being able to retrieve it instantly, under pressure, in the middle of a live conversation, that's a completely different skill.
Think about it like this. Imagine you've seen a word 100 times, in subtitles, in articles, in podcasts. Every time you see or hear it, you understand it immediately, no problem. But if someone asks you to produce that word, to say it yourself, in a sentence, on the spot, suddenly, it's not there. You're reaching for it and your hand is closing on air.
Because recognition and production use different mental pathways. Recognizing a word when you encounter it is a passive process. Producing it on demand is an active process. And most learners practice the passive side, listening, watching, reading, far more than the active side.
And so the question becomes, how do you train the active side? How do you build the muscle of speaking? Because it is a muscle. And like any muscle, it gets stronger the more you use it and weaker the more you avoid it.
And avoiding it is exactly what most learners do. Not because they're lazy, but because speaking feels risky in a way reading doesn't. If you misread a word, no one sees it. If you mispronounce it out loud in front of someone, you feel it. Your face goes red. You want to disappear.
And that fear, that very human, very understandable fear of making mistakes in public, is actually one of the biggest things keeping people stuck. So let's talk about it directly. Speaking anxiety is the fear or nervousness that comes with speaking in a second language. Speaking anxiety is incredibly common. Even very advanced learners experience it in high-pressure situations. Freeze up is to suddenly become unable to speak or act, usually due to nerves. I freeze up whenever someone switches into English unexpectedly. My mind just goes blank. Overthinking is thinking too much about what to say instead of just saying it. The problem isn't vocabulary, it's overthinking. You're editing before you've even spoken.
Overthinking is a huge one, and I want to spend some time on this because it's so central to why people freeze. When a native speaker is having a conversation, they are not consciously selecting grammar structures. They're not thinking, okay, this sentence needs present perfect, and this verb needs to agree with this subject, and this word has this preposition. That processing has become automatic. It's below the level of conscious thought.
But for a language learner, especially a learner who has studied a lot of grammar rules, there's this extra layer of monitoring happening in their head at the same time as they're trying to speak. And that monitoring takes up mental bandwidth. It slows everything down. And the more anxious they get, the louder that inner monitor becomes, and the slower the whole process gets until it just stops.
I remember the exact moment I understood this about myself. I was in a conversation class and the teacher asked me a question, a simple question, something like, "What did you do this weekend?" And I knew the answer. I had done things that weekend. I had the vocabulary. But the moment she asked, I started trying to construct the perfect sentence in my head before I spoke. Past simple or present perfect? Should I say I went or I have been? And while I was doing all of that internal grammar checking, I just stood there in silence. And she waited, and I waited, and it was agony.
And the answer, by the way, was just, I went to the market and had lunch with a friend. That's it. Simple. But my internal editor turned it into a grammar exam.
And this is something we want you to really hear. The goal of speaking is communication, not perfection. And native speakers' goal when they talk to you is to understand you and to be understood. They are not grading your grammar. They are having a conversation. And once you shift your focus from, I must say this correctly, to, I must say this, everything loosens up.
Internal monitor is the part of your brain that checks and edits your language before and while you speak. Turn your internal monitor down. It's not helping you in conversation. It's slowing you down.
Communication over perfection is the mindset of prioritizing being understood over being grammatically flawless. Once I adopted a communication over perfection mindset, my speaking improved 10 times faster.
Fluent enough is being able to communicate your meaning clearly, even if imperfectly. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be fluent enough to be understood. Now, that said, we're not telling you grammar doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Accuracy is a real goal, and it's worth working toward. But accuracy in speaking comes with practice and exposure over time. It cannot be forced by thinking harder in the moment. The harder you try to think your way to accuracy in real-time conversation, the less fluent you become.
Fluency and accuracy develop on slightly different timelines. Fluency first, getting used to producing language at natural speed, and accuracy follows as your brain internalizes patterns through repeated use. That's the sequence. You can't do it the other way around.
So practically, what does this mean? What do you actually do to start training that productive side? Let's get into the specific strategies.
Hey, if this is resonating with you, share this episode with someone who's going through the exact same thing, because so many learners feel alone in this struggle, and knowing that it's normal, that it's actually completely expected, can make such a difference.
And save this one. There's a lot here you'll want to come back to.
Okay, strategy number one, and this might sound strange at first, is to speak to yourself out loud in English every day.
I know. It sounds a little odd, but stay with us on this because there is real logic behind it.
Here's the thing. Most learners don't speak English because they have no one to speak. They live in a country where English isn't the first language, they don't have English-speaking friends nearby, they can't always afford a tutor, so they just don't practice speaking. And then they wonder why speaking feels so hard.
But speaking to yourself removes all of the social pressure. There's no one watching, no one judging, no one waiting for you to finish your sentence. It's just you and your voice and the English language. And that low-pressure environment is actually the perfect training ground.
What does this actually look like? It can look like a lot of different things. You can narrate what you're doing as you do it. I'm making coffee, I'm putting the kettle on, the water is almost boiling, I'm going to have eggs for breakfast, I think. Actually, no, I don't have eggs. I'll have toast. Simple, real, immediate.
You can also describe what you see around you. Look at a room and talk about it. There's a window on the left. The curtains are blue, or maybe they're more of a gray blue, I'm not sure. There's a plant on the windowsill, and it's looking a little dry. I should probably water it.
I should probably water it. That's a full sentence. That's grammar in use, and no one is grading you.
You can also practice answering questions. Just pick a question, any question, and answer it out loud. What did I do yesterday? What's something I'm looking forward to this week? What's a place I'd love to visit, and why? These are exactly the kinds of questions that come up in real conversations, and practicing them alone means you're less likely to freeze when they come up with a real person.
Self-talk is the practice of speaking to yourself as a language learning technique. 5 minutes of English self-talk every morning has done more for my fluency than hours of grammar study. Narrate your actions is to describe out loud what you are doing as you do it. While I was cooking dinner, I narrated everything in English. It felt silly at first, but it really works.
Think out loud is to verbalize your thoughts as you have them. Try thinking out loud in English while you're reading or watching something. It forces your brain to switch into production mode.
And here's the key thing about self-talk. You are building retrieval pathways. Every time you find a word or phrase and use it actively, you're strengthening the neural connection between that piece of language and your speaking system. The more you do it, the faster the retrieval becomes. And faster retrieval means more fluency.
Think of it like a path through a field. The first time you walk that path, the grass is tall and it's slow going. But every time you walk it again, the path gets clearer and quicker. Words are the same. The more times you actively produce a word, the more automatic it becomes.
Strategy number 2, and this one is underrated, is to shadow. Do you want to explain shadowing, Olivia?
Yes, shadowing is one of my absolute favorite techniques. So the idea is this. You listen to a piece of English audio and you speak along with it at the same time, not after, at the same time. You're literally following the speaker like a shadow.
You can do it with this podcast, actually. Play a section back and speak along with us as you listen. Match our rhythm, our intonation, our speed. Don't worry about meaning right now. Just match the sound and flow.
And what this does is it forces your mouth to produce English at a natural pace. Most learners speak very slowly because they're thinking between words. Shadowing trains your mouth to move faster, to connect words the way native speakers do, to use the same rhythms and patterns.
When I was working on a second language and started shadowing, the first thing I noticed was how much I had been pausing. In my head, my language felt smooth and fluent, but in reality, I was stopping between almost every word. Shadowing showed me the gap between how I thought I sounded and how I actually sounded.
And it's humbling at first, but incredibly useful, because you can't fix a problem you can't hear.
Shadowing is a technique where you speak simultaneously with a recording to practice natural pace and rhythm. I did 15 minutes of shadowing every day for a month, and my speaking rhythm improved dramatically. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice as you speak. Intonation is a big part of sounding natural. Shadowing helps you absorb it automatically.
Connected speech is the way words blend together in natural spoken English. In connected speech, Want to often sounds like wanna, and going to sounds like gonna. Shadowing helps you hear and produce this naturally.
Strategy number 3, and this one we talk about a lot, is to stop waiting for perfect conditions to speak. A lot of learners have this belief, usually unconscious, that they will start speaking English when they are ready, when they know enough words, when their grammar is better, when they feel confident.
And the problem with that is that confidence in speaking doesn't come before speaking. It comes from speaking. The confidence is the result, not the prerequisite. You don't get confident first and then start speaking. You start speaking, messily, imperfectly, nervously, and the confidence builds from there.
I used to wait until I felt ready. I spent years waiting, and the truth is that feeling of readiness never arrived on its own. One day I just decided, I'm going to speak, even if it's bad. And it was bad. It was honestly quite bad. My pronunciation was off, my grammar was patchy, I lost words in the middle of sentences and had to stop and start again. But the person I was speaking to understood me, and that was enough. That one conversation built more confidence than a year of waiting.
And the other piece of this is reframing what a mistake actually means. In English-speaking culture and in most Western communication culture, making an effort and getting something wrong is far more respected than staying silent to avoid being wrong. When you try, even imperfectly, people see effort and courage. When you stay silent out of fear, the message is, I'm not trying.
Native speakers are not judging your grammar. Genuinely, they are far more interested in what you're saying than how perfectly you're saying it. A grammatically perfect sentence with nothing interesting in it is far less engaging than a slightly imperfect sentence that says something real.
Confidence through action is the idea that speaking confidence builds by speaking, not by preparing more. You won't feel ready until you start. Start before you feel ready. Make mistakes, keep going. The confidence will follow. Reframe mistakes is to change how you think about making errors, seeing them as learning data rather than failures. Every mistake is telling you something useful. Reframe it as feedback, not failure.
Communicative risk is the act of attempting to express yourself even when uncertain. Taking communicative risks, using words you're not sure about, trying sentences you've never said, is exactly how productive competence grows.
Strategy number 4 is something I wish every learner knew earlier, and that's the power of chunks. In language learning, a chunk is a group of words that go together naturally, a fixed phrase, a collocation, a sentence stem. And the reason chunks are so powerful for speaking is that they bypass the word-by-word construction process that slows you down.
Think about it. If every time you want to say something, you're constructing the sentence from individual words, subject, verb, object, preposition, tense, it takes time and mental energy. But if you have chunks stored, whole phrases that you know and trust, you can retrieve those instantly and slot them into your conversation without thinking.
And I'd like to add that the thing is, what I mean is, to be honest with you, that reminds me of these aren't individual words, they're chunks, ready-made building blocks.
And here's the beautiful thing about chunks. They also carry the grammar with them. When you learn I'd like to, you're absorbing the contraction, the modal verb, the infinitive structure all at once, without having to consciously think about any of it. The grammar comes for free.
Chunk, or lexical chunk, is a group of words stored and used as a single unit. Learning English in chunks, whole phrases rather than single words, is one of the fastest ways to improve your speaking.
Sentence stem is the beginning part of a sentence that you can complete in many different ways. Sentence stems like, the reason I think this is, or what surprised me was, give you a confident starting point in conversation.
Collocation are words that naturally and frequently appear together. In English, we say make a decision, not do a decision. Collocations like this are best learned as chunks. I started keeping a chunk journal when I was learning. Every time I heard a phrase that sounded natural and useful, in a podcast, in a conversation, in a film, I wrote it down. Not just the words, but a full sentence example. And then I practiced saying those phrases out loud, in different contexts, until they felt like mine. Until they weren't something I was translating, they were just something I said.
Until they felt like mine. I love that. And that's the goal, right?
not to borrow language, to own it.
Completely. And the chunks that feel like yours, the ones you've practiced until they're automatic, those are the ones that come out when you're under pressure, in the middle of a real conversation when you don't have time to think.
And the fifth strategy, and this connects everything together, is practice something called output practice, specifically structured output practice, which sounds complicated but is actually very simple.
The idea is this: you set a timer, even just 3 minutes, and you talk out loud about anything, a topic, a question, a story. You don't stop to look up words. You don't start over when you make a mistake. You just keep going. You keep producing, because the act of pushing through difficulty, of reaching for a word you're not sure about, of rephrasing when you get stuck, of continuing even when the sentence isn't perfect, that is exactly how productive competence gets built.
And rephrasing is actually a really important skill here. In real conversations, native speakers rephrase all the time. They start a sentence, realize it's going somewhere complicated, and reroute. What I'm trying to say is, let me put it a different way. Actually, what I mean is, these are not signs of weakness. They are signs of communicative intelligence.
And for a language learner, knowing how to rephrase is like having an emergency exit. When you get stuck, and you will get stuck, instead of falling silent, you have options. You can approach the meaning from a different angle. You can use simpler words. You can ask for a moment to think.
Output practice is deliberately practicing speaking or writing, especially under time pressure. Output practice, even just talking to yourself for 5 minutes a day, builds fluency faster than passive input alone.
Rephrase is to say something again in different words. I couldn't remember the exact word, so I rephrased. Instead of exhausted, I said very, very tired. It worked.
Keep going is to continue speaking even when you make mistakes, rather than stopping. The best thing you can do in a difficult conversation is keep going. Momentum matters more than perfection.
Filler phrases are words and phrases used to hold space while you think. Phrases like, "That's a good question, let me think about that," and "How do I put this?" give you time to collect your thoughts without going completely silent.
Filler phrases are gold. Every native speaker uses them constantly. That's a great question. Let me think. Well, the thing is, you know what I mean. They buy you time without creating an awkward silence. And for a language learner, they are absolutely a legitimate tool.
There's no rule that says you have to speak without pausing. No one is timing you. Use the time. Think, rephrase, reach for the word, and keep going.
You know, when I think back to all the learners I've known, and there have been many because this work connects us to so many people, the ones who improved fastest were never the ones with the biggest vocabulary or the best grammar. They were the ones who were willing to be imperfect, who spoke up even when they weren't sure, who kept trying after every stumble. The language caught up with the courage every single time.
That's really beautifully put. The language catches up with the courage.
And if you're listening to this right now and feeling like your English is stuck, like you understand everything but can't say anything, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not stuck. You are in the gap. The gap is normal. The gap is temporary, and everything we've talked about today will help you close it.
All right, let's bring everything together. 3 things to take from today.
Number 1, the gap between understanding English and speaking English is real, it's normal, and it has a name. Receptive competence develops faster than productive competence. This is not a flaw. It's how language learning works.
Number 2, stop waiting to feel ready. Confidence in speaking comes from speaking, not from preparing more. Start speaking before you feel ready. Make mistakes. Keep going. The confidence will follow.
And number 3, train your productive competence deliberately. Self-talk, shadowing, chunk building, output practice. These are not tricks. They are the actual work. Do them every day and your speaking will change.
Write those down or save this episode and come back to it, because these ideas are worth sitting with.
Thank you so much for being here today. This topic is close to our hearts because we know how much it matters. The inability to speak when you know the language is in there is one of the most frustrating feelings in the world, and you deserve to get past it.
Tomorrow, we're talking about something that even fluent English speakers struggle with. It's something that comes up in every conversation, every meeting, every social situation, and most people have never been taught it directly. You really do not want to miss it.
Come find us on YouTube for the full transcript and send us a message in English about something you learned today.
We read every single one. See you tomorrow.